Hi, and welcome to This Dementia Life, sponsored by Dementia Action Alliance, powered by the people with purpose. I'm your host, Brian LeBlanc, and I'm actually living with Alzheimer's disease, diagnosed in October of 2014. And I live each and every day as well as I possibly can, moment by moment. Today's guest is nurse practitioner and author Carmen Buck from Austin, Texas. Carmen has a very unique story, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Welcome to the podcast, Carmen.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me here.
Well, you're welcome. You and I are very used to being on Zoom, on screen together, because we do quite a bit of live videos and so forth. We're good friends, but never had you on the program before, and we have a lot to talk about. So, I tell you what, let's get into your background a little bit, just to let everyone know, where your background started and how you came to be now.
Okay. All right. So, I've been a nurse for almost 40 years, which is, I like to say I was 12 when I started, but not really. Yeah. And then I went on and
allow 12-year-olds to start nursing school.
No.
But in your case, they probably did an exception.
Like Doogie Howser, kind of, yeah.
Exactly.
And then, I eventually became a nurse practitioner, so about 20 years. And the last couple, I would say 10, 15 years, were just primarily with the healthcare for elderly. And then I specialized out in care of dementia. So that's how I came into knowing a little bit about and working with families and people with Alzheimer's and various other forms of dementia.
So let me ask you this: you said that you started working with the elderly, as your career went on. What led you there?
Well, when I moved from Hawaii to Texas, I did house calls, really. And so I had everything that I needed, and I went to people's homes and also different long-term care communities. And so that's where I specialized out in geriatric psychiatry, neurology, and care of the elderly. Up until about 2.5 years ago, I was very busy in the clinic.
Now, being that I know a little bit about your background and so forth, those of us that are living in the dementia world is what we call it. We didn't have very good experiences starting off with our neurologist, and then for the visits that came after. We saw people like yourself, a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant, but there was still that disconnect, that humanistic disconnect. But your patients, the people that you cared for, they loved you, and I want to talk about, we talk a lot about Dr. Danny Potts, who's a neurologist up in Tuscaloosa. He was on one of my podcasts earlier in the year, and he's like you. He'll go in and he has that humanistic approach. He sits and talks and spends time. I want you to talk about your visits, your appointments with your patients, and what you did.
Okay. Well, especially with house calls. With house calls, I was a visitor in their home. And so it gave me a chance to see what it was like, at least for the time I was there. And even when I was in the clinic, I was very fortunate that the organization I worked for if I needed 30 minutes, 45 minutes, whatever was needed, it was okay to take that to work with families. And I loved hearing their stories and hearing what was going on, because I think it's really difficult to care for people and to, you know, meet their needs if you don't know what's really going on. And that takes time. There's a certain vulnerability and relationships that need to be built, and it takes time. And so I was able to have that, and I loved hearing their stories. So it makes sense that I'm a photographer and author now, because that's part of the stories. Love the stories, and there's this real healing power to being able to share your story as well. You know, to tell what's really going on.
So, so let me ask you this: is there any dementia related illnesses in your background, in your family background?
I have since I started writing, since I left the clinic and started to write my book and to do more work. There has been since with my godparents and some in-laws, but otherwise, no. It was a field that I just kind of grew into. So it wasn't because of my own experience. It is now, but it wasn't then.
Yeah. What caused you though? What did you have an epiphany one day that you said, you know, I want to go into nursing?
Well, I was in high school, so I don't know. I was a music major first, and then I loved the nursing. I loved nursing too, and I went into nursing then. That was a long time ago, Brian. So as much as I can remember 40 years ago, there was no epiphany. There was an epiphany to follow my passion with photography and writing and storytelling, but I don't think there was to become a nurse.
So okay, so you went from being a nurse practitioner, helping and caring for hundreds of patients that you had, spending your time with them, and you started listening to their stories, talking to their care partners, talking to them, and seeing, you know, how they lived, how they got along with each other. And then you had another epiphany. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so, you know, day in and day out, I was hearing various stories, and I'm following people for years, right? So I'm seeing them, and from maybe time of diagnoses, or even from the time that they're told that there's some cognitive problems, through diagnoses and beyond. And I'm watching how they manage and what they do as a family, and how they come together or how they don't, and then what they do to get the help that they needed. And so it's a strange thing, you know. You kind of think as your clinician as somebody on the outside looking in, but in my case, I became part of their story in a sense, and I really loved that, because that was just deeply fulfilling for me. And so I don't know, I just kept thinking somebody needs to share these stories, as they're inspirational, and you hear what tough times people go through and what they did to manage it. And I just thought some of the petty things in the world would seem just that, very petty, when you think about the great stuff that goes on. And truly one day I just had this epiphany that I needed to tell the stories and to write a book. And then I couldn't imagine doing it without photos, without images, because that was a passion of mine always, was photography. However, I was not a professional photographer then. And so that was probably about 3 years ago. And it took me about 6 months to get things in order to actually leave my practice and my career. And I'm still a nurse practitioner, I'm still licensed and things, but I'm not in a clinic anymore. But that was a huge jump. It was a huge jump. You know, at almost 60, to say I'm going to change careers and I'm going to write a book, even though I've never written anything. And yeah, I just had faith that it was going to work out.
But to walk away from a very successful career and to start writing a book and being a professional photographer, I mean, that had to be quite a culture shock for you.
Well, yeah, it sounds kind of crazy, right? To give that up. And so I just thought, well, but I gotta say, it was like I referred to the Blues Brothers. It was my mission from God. So I never had a doubt that I was doing the right thing. As crazy as it looked from the outside, I just knew I was doing just exactly what I needed to be doing. And
now, I must admit, I forgot to, my book is in the other room, and oh, you happen to have one hand?
I do.
Wow. Imagine that.
When do I not have this with me? It's always with me.
Wow.
Hey, this took me almost 3 years to write. Okay.
I didn't even get the word. I didn't even get the word book out. Here it is. So, as ladies and gentlemen,
the pretty pictures inside and everything.
Hold the book back up. As you can see, that's the name of the book. Just See Me: Sacred Stories from the Other Side of Dementia. And you know, the just see me part is what hit me most of all, because that's what those of us that are living with a dementia related illness, that's what we want people to see. We want them to just see us. Mm-hmm. You know, we don't want to see our disease. We don't want them. Yes, we're going to have bad days. Okay, we're going to have good days, but we want people to still see us as a human being. Is that why you changed? Is that why you chose the title for your book?
Yeah, it evolved into that way. It was actually something one of the ladies had said. Her daughters were always telling her how beautiful she was. And she said, well, that's funny, because I look in the mirror and I just see me. And my editor heard those words and she said, you know, looking at all this with the stories that you've written, and she said, that's a real common thread in everything, is people just want to be seen. And that was like, yes, that's what it needs to be. So yeah, it just fit. And you know, because I'm a strong believer that the more that we understand things, you know, the less fear there is. And the more so across the board too, you know, the stories, as you mentioned, the theme of isolation and the stigma came up, that people didn't feel, number one, like their story was going to help anyone, because there isn't anybody else out there going through it like they are. That's because they're not around it. They don't realize that, you know, as well as we're all individuals, but at the same time, there's other people struggling with the same things. And so, you know, they felt so alone, like they were the only ones. And, you know, so where there's less fear, there's more room for love and understanding. And the more that we talk about it and bring to light just different facets of it, I think the world would be a lot better place, a lot less lonely.
So, okay. So you decided at that point that you were going to start taking pictures or taking photos of or following 13 families. Mm-hmm. And I want you to talk about when you presented the idea to these families, what was their reaction then? And what was their reaction when you presented them with a copy of the book?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's kind of interesting. So in the beginning, some of them were my patients, you know, and they came in and I'd have to tell them I was getting ready to leave, which was terrible because, you know, it takes time to build up that relationship, and it was hard for the families to lose somebody that they trusted. And then I told them why I was leaving, and many were interested in to share their stories of their loved ones, you know, for that legacy to live on, even though A, they thought nobody would really relate to their story, and B, there was no way they really cared about having pictures taken or the portraits, but they would do it for me. So it was easy to come up with, and people just kept adding on. And some of the families I just met casually someplace, and I would talk about what I'm doing, and they're like, we would love to be a part of it. So there were several I didn't know previously. So by the time, though, throughout those 2.5 years, you know, I had met with the families initially, and I had one question on my agenda. I asked them, what do you want the world to know? not about dementia. I didn't have it about that. I'm like, well, what do you want the world to know? And interestingly, how quick people came up with stories and what was important to them. And I didn't plan it that way, but all 13 were uniquely different, and different issues, different things that they wanted to talk about. And it was just wonderful in that way. And I did not plan that. And that's probably why it worked out perfectly. And by the end, of course, I'd seen them many times, and I had delivered their portraits to them, and, you know, their story became, and then I had my story related to them, because it was wonderful being a part of their families for that time. And then it became our story together, which was pretty incredible. Yeah. And all across the board, the same people who really didn't care about their images grasp on to their portraits and just said that they were just, you know, they had just priceless for them, just priceless.
What in the beginning, when you talked about taking pictures of both, because this was pictures of both the individual with dementia as well as their families, was there reluctance from anyone to have those portraits made?
I don't know if I'd say reluctance, but they really just didn't see the value in having those images as part of the story. Or to have, they're like, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to want to remember this time anyway. And that was really eye-opening for everyone, because what happened was they realized that every time is really sacred and important. And those moments, and, you know, I caught glimmers of awareness and smiles and laughs, and just the connection, even if no words were spoken, the connection between the family members was so incredible that they couldn't miss seeing that. And that's why they became such priceless treasures. And of course, many of the people in the book during the 3 years since I started it have passed. And those portraits became even more priceless for them, because they're not going to have that opportunity to ever have that moment again, which is the case for all of us. You know, we only have this moment, and we're not going to have that moment again.
Well, that's the truth. I mean, I'm huge on taking photos because, you know, I want to remember where I've been, what I've done, who I've met, who I came across. And there are times that I'll relive those moments. I'll even relive those feelings of just wonder and excitement and fun and just warm feelings, because you look upon those moments, and you don't have to have Alzheimer's or any other dementia related illness to feel those things. You feel those things even if you're okay. But
Right.
when you have this disease and you live moment to moment, and some days, you know, you can't remember what happened 2 days ago, or, you know, as I was explaining earlier today, that I wasn't having a very good morning. When you look at those pictures, I'm looking at the pictures behind you, and some of those pictures are some of the pictures from your book of the people that you wrote about. That's got to make you feel something so extra special, that it was like you were giving them a gift.
Yeah, it was a gift, but it was also a gift for me, and I think across the board, because I have gotten such feedback from people about how amazing it's been for them to read the stories, and even if they're not in them, and how they're feeling about reading it, and it gives them hope, and it helps them to realize how important it is to live in the moment. And, you know, and that's something, I mean, we as friends, we do too, you know. And I don't know, can we talk about the project we're doing?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll try not to.
I was going to bring that up, but since you mentioned it, go ahead.
Yeah. So during the time I was writing this book, you saw my work on Instagram. And I like to say you stalked me, but that's probably not fair.
I did not stalk you. I just simply recognized your photographs. I thought they were beautiful, and I wanted to say thank you for taking those photos. But you say I stalked you, so
Okay, so there was no involved, but you reached out to me and you commented, and then I started to look at what you were doing, and I thought, well, that's pretty incredible. Look at this, and you know how you were giving speeches, and then you had written to me, or maybe it was the time we had talked, because I asked you to write the foreword to my book, and you commented and said, you know, what you need to do is to follow me on a typical day. You be there around in the mornings when I'm foggy and when times are really hard. And so I took that challenge and like, okay, let's do that, because that's a cool story. And we've been fortunate enough to been able to speak together and to our team members on a dementia-friendly cruise. And so I've had the opportunity to be there.
right. And you happened to be there one day where I had a bad day, and that was hard. That was hard for me to be seen by all these people that normally I'm okay. But on that particular day, I was not having a very good day, and you were there to capture some of that. So I thank you for that. So
Yeah. Well,
so
the first day I couldn't, the first time I couldn't capture any of that. But at a later time, another time, I did, because you didn't recognize me, but you recognized my dog. So I
yeah,
got pictures of you with Sparky, and it's really very moving. Yeah.
yeah.
And then we drove across country together, and that was a trip.
That's
Enjoying the moment. We enjoyed the moment.
that's a whole nother book in traveling. And for people that don't know, traveling through the state of Texas, it takes you at least 20 days to get from one to the other. It's simply huge. So anyway, so all right, so you did that. Now you have your book, and I have to say your book is doing so very well on Amazon. For those of you that want to get a copy of the book, go to Amazon.com and type in "Just See Me," and you'll get up to the book. And so that's what you've been doing. What are you doing now? What's going on with Carmen now?
Well, I'm quite busy doing photography and helping people tell their stories, whether it's individuals or families or even businesses. Businesses have their why and their inspiration, just like I have, what made me leave my practice to start my business. And so I help people share those so that they're showing what they need to out there on social media and websites and things. We only have a few seconds to grab people, and so those images need to be powerful and tell a story. And that's what I love to do.
Now, Carmen, some of the other stuff that we are, or that you and I are involved in, is we're part of a team that goes on cruises, and I know that sounds like such hard work, but in reality, it is work, because what we do. Well, why don't you tell everyone what we do on these cruises?
Okay, so this is a pretty amazing thing, especially coming from a nurse, right, or nurse practitioner. We are team members, and so it's a large cruise, but it's a smaller group of people who may need extra care. So it might be families and or care partners, people with dementia, and even extended family. And this is like a trip of a lifetime for them. And as team members, we're there to support them, and there's some respite care. We even had Zumba on the last one, which was a lot of fun. And then Brian and I, we both speak and give some educational topics, and it's really just more interactional than anything. And it's great to chat with people. And then I'm photographing the time too, which is extra special, I think, because it is special time for families.
And one of the things that we noticed with your photography, and also you captured a lot of things on the last cruise, but we saw people transform, people that were very nonverbal. They didn't really react or interact with anyone when they first came on board. But by the end of the cruise, they were talking, they were laughing, they were, taking part in Zumba, taking part during the respite portion, doing all sorts of things. It was so unbelievably beautiful to see them come to life. And for me, it was a personal thing, because I saw myself in them. When I'm having a bad day, I can't really speak. I can't, my balance is really bad. I fall and so forth. But then when I come out of that, I'm sort of rejuvenated, that I'm so excited that I got to talk again and I got to do things again. How did that make you feel when you witnessed that? Because you captured it on film.
Yeah, and watching through the lens is, I think, even more powerful for me than just observing with my eyes, because I'm zeroing in on those expressions and the connections between people. And so, yes, it was between families, the individual families, but then even family to family, they were recognizing the changes and the progress, and what a miracle that is, because then they became even closer and more understanding of one another. And then, of course, those of us as part of the team, we all have our own experiences that we bring with it. And to see someone who was previously kind of looking down and not really participating, or was not able, or was afraid to speak, just becomes so verbal and say just really amazing things to their family, and to have recollections of details from years gone by, and to see the look on their families' faces, to hear them say that, was just nothing short of a miracle. It was an incredible experience. We were all a little teary-eyed to leave even. We got so attached to one another, all of us.
It was a rather beautiful experience, because it did just that transformation process, and you were there, thankfully to capture it all. So I know the families are very grateful for you capturing those moments. I'm grateful for you capturing some of the moments that you captured, because your photography is phenomenal. And you can go on Instagram and or on Facebook at Carmen Buck Photography to go see her work. She does some wonderful, wonderful things, been recognized for her photography, as well as for her care with for those of us in the dementia world. And she's doing wonderful things, and I can't wait to see what you do in the future, because I think it's going to be huge.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just beginning, I think.
Yeah, I think so. So, well, Mickey Mouse's hand says time is up, and that concludes another version of This Dementia Life. We thank you for watching. Now, there again, Carmen's book is on Amazon. Just see me on Amazon.com. You can buy it in different versions of her book, and if you write to her or send her message, she'll send you an autograph that you can stick inside the book for your keepsake. So, Carmen, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I look forward to working with you in the future. We're going to be going on a cruise in a couple of months, going to Alaska. So if you go to our Facebook pages, you can go on and get the link to find out how you can join us.
Because we do have fun. We do have a lot of fun.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit. Well, thank you again, Carmen. Thanks for being here. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for viewing another episode of This Dementia Life. See you next time.